Hi, everybody. My name is Diane Hatcher. I'm with Core Compete, and I'm happy to be here today to present to you. My topic today is called Reduce Your SAS Carbon Footprint While Increasing SAS Value. Thank you for turning in to this. My objectives for this presentation is really to share with you how you can essentially lower your total cost of ownership and increase the value of your SAS environment, essentially reducing your carbon footprint of your SAS environment. Very similar to reducing your carbon footprint in general when you're talking about emissions. Basically what we want to do is lower the emissions and increase the quality of life. Same type of thing within the SAS environment. You have the opportunity to reduce your carbon footprint of your SAS environment while at the same time increasing its value. So what is your SAS carbon footprint? So this is an analogy that I make around what is actually makes up your SAS ecosystem. Your SAS carbon footprint is made up of essentially what you would think of in terms of your SAS assets itself, your SAS workloads, but it also includes infrastructure to support your SAS environment, as well as the data that is used and created within that environment. So as SAS usage increases in your company, what happens is, of course, your users are getting value out of that SAS environment. And what they're getting is tangibly, they're getting, they're creating SAS workloads that run on your server, right? They're creating SAS data sets. They're creating analytical models, and they're creating reports. All these things build up within your environment because you're saving the code, you're saving the models, you're saving the reports, you're saving the data, right? And as that usage increases, what happens is the infrastructure required to support those assets continues to increase. So things around the infrastructure itself, the amount of storage space, right? SAS requires high-speed storage to really perform well, and that can be quite expensive. And so IT is constantly being asked to buy more storage to support your SAS environment. You have to buy more servers for supporting those. As the workloads grow, you need a place to run those workloads. And of course, because you're processing data, the more data that's being processed, you have network bandwidth things that you have to consider. And there's all the tools that you're using within the SAS environment itself to really optimize the use of SAS. And all these things grow over time in order to create this carbon footprint. And for organizations that have used SAS for many, many years, the environments can be quite large to manage. And so essentially what you can do is actually you should be performing a tune-up on your environment so you can essentially clean up the emissions from your SAS environment so you can reduce that carbon footprint. And at the same time, what that does, it helps you get more out of the SAS environment without having to spend a lot more money on infrastructure. So the first thing we want to do in this, and what we can do within this, is really discover how SAS is really used in the organization. I'm talking about really digging down into the X-ray of your assets. So if you think about, if you go to the doctor and you get an X-ray, you're really getting a really clear vision of what's happening underneath your skin within the body. It's more than taking your temperature, for example. So you can so I kind of look at, if you look at overall server usage, for example, your CPU utilization, that's more like taking your temperature and seeing if you have a fever. But what I'm talking about is actually getting it at a much more granular level so you can see specifically what's happening in that environment. The good news is all that information is available within your SAS environment. So all these elements are already there in that environment. So what are those elements? So the first thing is really talking to the users. I know that this seems to be a very common, or very not so common, but seems like a no-brainer type of thing, a common sense. But usually what I see is when people talk to their users about SAS, I see that they ask questions like, what procedures are you using? What kind of data step are you using? And those type of things. That's not really what I'm getting at here. What I really think when you talk to users, what you really need to understand is really to discover the business processes that they're doing to support SAS. You need to discover why they're using SAS to solve their problems. You need to understand what those problems are that they're solving. You need to discover how they're solving their problems. So how are they using SAS to solve those problems? And you need to discover where they're running it. Are they running it on, where they're using SAS? Are they using SAS on a server? Are they using SAS locally? All these are really important to understanding what's going on in the environment. And finally, how often are they solving these problems? Is this a daily problem that they have to solve? Is it weekly? Is it monthly? Really want to kind of get into kind of the day of the life of your SAS users to really understand what they're doing in their SAS world. The next element to look at is the actual SAS code files. This is where you can really look at what procedures they're using, what data steps they're using, how are they writing their code, those types of things. And really you discover the coding methodology that's being used. And this is good information to understanding, are they leveraging proc-SQL? Are they leveraging in database? Are they using proc-sort? Things that may be better optimized better optimized than the way they're doing it now. And really understanding those coding practices. And you can probably find that these coding practices are actually fairly common across the different departments and different user groups. And so it's kind of a cultural, SAS cultural thing that could be easily addressed if there's something easy to fix from an efficiency perspective. The next thing to look at is storage. Right? You want to discover what data sets are being stored, where they're being stored, and how they're being stored. Are they being stored as SAS data sets, or are they being output to Excel files, or are they writing to a database? Understanding what is there, what data sources are actually being used, and then how they're being stored. SAS log files to me is the gold in the system. So if you don't have logging turned on in your environment, I highly recommend that it's turned on. The SAS logs contain such a rich amount of information for you to discover what's actually happening. So SAS code files gives you kind of a pattern kind of thing, but the log files tell you what's actually running in your environment. So it gives you that look and saying, these are the code files this is the code that's actually running, this is what they're doing, this is how long it's taking, and this is when this is all happening. So the log files are really kind of the crux of a lot of the information you can use in order to do the tune-up of your environment. Finally, there's SAS metadata. There's two main types of metadata in the SAS environment. There's a SAS metadata server, it uses the metadata server. There's also within SAS Foundation itself, there is metadata that SAS Foundation itself captures. And both types of metadata are extremely important in understanding not only the SAS assets that you typically find, as like SAS data sets and things, but it also helps you identify what else is in the environment. Am I using projects, enterprise guide projects? Am I using enterprise miner models? Am I using web reports? Am I using visual analytics reports or web reports to do reports? Am I using stored processes? These are all things that are important to understand through the metadata layer. as a result of gathering of the information about these elements, you can really start to understand now what is happening in the environment. So the bar chart at the top part of the screen can be used to analyze over time your server utilization. Not so much when I say utilization, I don't mean in terms of system utilization, but in terms of how it is being used. So, so you think about what days of the week are more busy than other days of the week, or what days of the month are more busy than other days of the month. What departments are using the system more than other departments. The bar chart on the right is actually a time of day. How often or what workloads are running at different times of day. Workloads that are running in the morning versus in the afternoon versus in the evening. And even looking at it on the weekend. Are there times of what we call off-peak times that can be leveraged in order to provide more capacity to your users? In the bottom left corner is a table that can be used to analyze, that can show the results of your storage and analyzing your storage. It's as simple as taking a look at, are you archiving old data? Is there data that's out there that hasn't been active or accessed within a year? Can you reclaim storage space on this expensive high-speed storage drive by archiving that data and freeing it? The pie chart in the middle represents really patterns within your workloads. So what's actually going on? Are users doing data prep work? Are they doing ETL, data prep versus ETL? Are they doing analysis? Are they writing reports? And so really understand what the purpose of these workloads are. If you look specifically at just the procedures themselves and the methods that are being used, what you'll find is the vast majority of these are data step and proc SQL. So you're going to get the impression that these procedures that SAS is being used primarily for data preparation. But what's really happening is that these data preparation steps are happening in order to do a report or in order to do an analysis. So there's a lot of data prep work up front to create the data that you need, and then there's only one or two procedures after that you need in order to run the analytics or to create a report. And so the majority of the code that you're looking at is probably going to be data preparation related. And so that can skew the view that you have on the type of things that are happening in the organization. So if you look at a workload as a whole, what you can then do is essentially determine what the actual intent of that workload is. It gives you a more accurate picture of what's actually being done. The other thing that you can look at as well is looking at the data sources that are being used. If you're using SAS data sets versus a database versus flat files, you can compare the performance between these different data sources and see if you have I/O bottlenecks or if your I/O bottlenecks are related to specifically a specific data source type. Finally, on the far right is what you see is a tile map that essentially takes a bunch of log files, workloads, and looks at the total CPU and the real time for each of those workloads. And then you can map these in a report, like a tile chart. And these, by the way, were created in SAS Viya for this purpose. But taking a look at analyzing this output and saying, oh, look, this box that I have drawn over this chart indicates that 25% of my workloads, of my CPU usage, was actually based upon these 25, 30 jobs that are written. Of all the hundreds of jobs that were running in my environment, only about 25 to 30 of them took up 25% of my CPU, right? So that's a great opportunity for you to understand, well, what's happening in these workloads. I should take a look at those in more detail. So as an ecosystem itself, right, SAS is part of a broader ecosystem. SAS is hardly ever used in and of itself. You're either pulling data from somewhere else, something that's not SAS. You're writing it out so something not SAS can read it, whether that's a marketing campaign, whether it's a forecast, whether it's inventory optimization, whatever it is, that data is being used to solve another problem. And so in order to build a comprehensive or in order to create or perform a comprehensive tune-up, you really need to understand the entire ecosystem. So you need to first break down, how does SAS fit in the broader scheme of things? Since SAS is part of a broader ecosystem, you can look at SAS as a puzzle piece within the bigger corporate puzzle. How does SAS fit within the overall objectives of the organization? Where do the executives see SAS adding value, and how can we improve that value that SAS provides? Of course, breaking down the information technology that's involved from an information technology team. IT is going to have a vision for the overall technical architecture for the organization, how SAS fits within that architecture, and what the IT policies are related to that. They're also going to have their own perspective on the challenges of SAS, how it is to support SAS as an enterprise solution, what challenges they face with SAS and with integration with other systems. So it's important to understand it from their perspective. And we've already talked about the SAS user stakeholders and understanding their business processes, breaking down their objectives that they're trying to achieve and which SAS is helping them to achieve. And of course, we also talked about the analysis of the SAS assets themselves. So breaking down the workloads, breaking down the code, breaking down the data that's being used by SAS in order to get the full picture, to do a comprehensive tune-up of your organization's SAS footprint. So to create the formula of success, now that you have all the elements broken down, you have a broader ecosystem, now you can really take a look at understanding how I can reduce my carbon footprint. How can I reduce my total cost of ownership? So from a data perspective, we can reclaim storage space by archiving old and inactive data. We can also look at workload optimizations, understanding which workloads are taking up the most resources within the environment, and being able to either optimize them or move them to execute during an off-peak time period. For opportunities to increase the value of SAS is look at applying coding practices. We talked about being able to analyze code files, understanding the current methods that are being used. Well, there may be better methods that could add more value, make things perform faster, or maybe help you to do things in a much more efficient and effective manner. And SAS is always coming out with new features, their software, taking advantage of these features to either increase performance of the environment, or to take advantage of new methodologies and new algorithms that may be better and more efficient than ones that you've been using in the past. So the elements that are there in order that make up your ecosystem are already there. The elements are already there, and they're telling you a story. But so you can take all the information that is behind those elements and essentially read behind the lines and to know how to reduce your carbon footprint. So being able to do a tune-up of the environment by essentially cleaning up the engine and optimizing the performance of your SAS environment. So essentially reducing your carbon footprint. So thank you for listening. Feel free to contact me with any questions you have. Stay safe, stay well.